Okay, this next video is going to be on something different, and I know one person that's really going to appreciate it, and will probably forward it on to a few others. And for those that don't know what it is, you might want to stop and listen and see if you are experiencing the same thing. So, today I want to talk about martyrdom. I've been studying this on and off for 7 years. And I just want to get it out there and see if you are dealing with this or with a partner that has this. So what can happen when martyrdom becomes like more than a personality trait? It turns into an identity. So most people hear the word martyr and immediately think of someone that's selfless, compassionate, giving, and willing to sacrifice everything for others. Now, those qualities can certainly exist in healthy people. Healthy people help those that they love, and they make sacrifices when necessary. And, of course, healthy people support family members and friends through difficult times. The difference, well, it's that healthy people do not build their entire identity around those sacrifices. A martyr often begins defining themselves through hardship, disappointment, sacrifice, suffering, and endurance. Their struggles become part of how they see themselves and how they explain the world around them. They come to view themselves as the person who has given the most, tolerated the most, suffered the most, received the least in return, most of all. Over time, the people closest to them stop simply being family members, friends, partners, or children. The people closest to them become the story. Their struggles become part of the martyr's story. Their mistakes become part of the story. Their accomplishments do. Their relationships become part of the martyr's story. Every disagreement becomes part of the martyr's story. Every success, every disappointment. The focus gradually shifts away from the lives of the people around them and back toward the martyr's experience of those people. Everyone around them becomes supporting material for the identity that they have built around themselves. Living with someone like this can slowly change the way a person actually thinks, feels, and functions. Did you know that? Many people find themselves carrying emotional responsibilities that never belong to them. They become focused on managing another person's disappointments, frustrations, moods, and reactions. They spend increasing amounts of time trying to avoid conflict, prevent hurt feelings, and maintain peace. And if you do know that they have it, you surely try not to do things that will give them something to talk about. The relationship often does not begin in a way that feels ordinary. In many cases, it feels extraordinary. The person may seem unusually attentive, unusually understanding, interested in every aspect of your life even. They remember details other people forget. They ask questions that make you feel seen, heard, and understood. They appear fascinated by your experiences, your dreams, your fears, your disappointments, and your struggles. Many people describe feeling as though they have finally met someone who truly understands them. Part of what makes the experience so powerful is the way they make you feel. They encourage you to talk about yourself, and they listen very carefully. They remember details from previous conversations. They make you feel important, valued, appreciated, and special. Emotional attachment develops naturally because the connection feels meaningful and unique. As time passes, however, many people begin noticing changes within themselves. They become exhausted. They become frustrated. They become emotionally drained and they struggle to relax. They lose sleep. They find themselves constantly thinking about the relationship and trying to understand what is happening. Many begin walking on eggshells because they never know what version of the person they are going to encounter. Yes, these lovely people have mood swings that are just as bad as the weather in Kansas. One of the most difficult aspects of these relationships is uncertainty. The person living in the relationship eventually reaches a point to where they no longer know where they stand. One day they feel loved, another day they feel rejected. One week they are told they are important. The following week they are treated as though they barely matter. The emotional atmosphere becomes unstable and unpredictable. A person may hear declarations of love and commitment only to hear threats of separation days later. They may spend weeks feeling criticized, blamed, or unwanted, only to have the same person suddenly become affectionate, attentive, and emotionally available again. The warmth returns, oh yes. The connection returns, and the hope returns. The confusion becomes even more powerful because the martyr often continues doing things that reinforce the attachment. They may continue helping. They may continue showing up when needed. They may continue performing thoughtful acts that leave the other person feeling cared for and valued. The relationship rarely feels completely bad because, well, moments of kindness continue appearing alongside moments of pain. This creates an emotional contradiction that can be extremely difficult to sort out. One reality contains confusion, criticism, instability, and emotional exhaustion. The other contains kindness, generosity, support, and genuine acts of caring. The person living in the relationship is constantly trying to reconcile those two realities. The effects often become visible physically as well as emotionally. Many people notice they become crankier, more frustrated, and more emotionally reactive than they once were because dealing with these people, it's like a Jekyll and Hyde. Sleep becomes difficult because the mind continues replaying conversations and searching for explanations. Some people, they overeat. Some lose their appetite. Others develop headaches, fatigue, difficulty concentrating, or a constant sense of emotional exhaustion with serious anxiety. The body is responding to a relationship that never feels emotionally predictable. Many survivors eventually notice that another change comes into play. Trust begins disappearing. So at first they stop trusting the person creating the confusion. Later they begin losing trust in other people as well. Compliments feel suspicious or fake. And kindness, well, that feels kind of suspicious too. Interest feels suspicious. All of it does. After spending years watching words fail to match actions, they begin questioning the motives of people who have done nothing wrong. One of the deepest wounds left behind by these relationships is not simply the pain caused by the relationship itself. The deeper wound is a damage done to a person's ability to trust others and sometimes even trust themselves. Human beings are wired to seek consistency and safety. When affection, rejection, criticism, approval, connection, and distance arrive unpredictably, well, the brain begins searching constantly for patterns. People become highly aware of changes in mood, tone of voice, facial expressions, and behavior. They begin monitoring the emotional environment around them because they are trying to predict what comes next and, well, they avoid the next emotional upheaval. As emotional attachment deepens and instability continues, trauma bonding can begin developing. The attachment is no longer based entirely on love. The attachment becomes connected to hope, confusion, relief, uncertainty, and repeated cycles of emotional highs and lows. And yes, your body gets used to going up and down, up and down, up and down. The person begins chasing the return of the version of the relationship that feels safe and loving. A turning point eventually arrives. The focus begins shifting away from understanding the other person and toward understanding the relationship itself. Patterns begin emerging. The same arguments repeat. The same promises repeat. The same disappointments repeat. Well, the same lies repeat too. The same emotional cycles repeat. Recognition slowly replaces confusion. Many people eventually stop questioning themselves and start questioning the behavior. The confusion begins fading because the pattern becomes obvious. The same lies repeat. The same excuses repeat. The same manipulations repeat. The same contradictions repeat. Trust begins eroding. The person no longer believes what they are hearing because the words and actions no longer match. Promises are made and broken. Stories change. Explanations change. Sometimes even in the same sentence. Reality seems to shift depending on what serves the other person in that particular moment. Many survivors eventually realize they are not the problem. Many survivors eventually realize that someone who genuinely loves another person does not repeatedly, create the same pain, confusion, instability, and uncertainty. That realization often becomes the beginning of clarity. So now things become even more complicated when narcissistic traits are added to the picture. Now, not every martyr is a narcissistic person, and not every narcissist is a martyr. Certain relationships become especially confusing when those two patterns begin operating together, because the individual is no longer seeking only sympathy and validation. They are also seeking admiration, attention, influence, and control. Meanwhile, saying that you're the one that's trying to control them when it's actually them. Many people imagine narcissistic individuals as loud, arrogant, boastful, and obvious. Reality is often much more complicated. Some of the most difficult people to recognize are often the ones everyone likes. They may appear thoughtful, generous, compassionate, attentive, and understanding. They may seem like the nicest person anyone has ever met. Part of their ability to attract people comes, from the way they engage with others. They ask questions, they show interest, they listen carefully. Again, like the martyr, they remember details. They make people feel important. They make people feel heard. They learn names, histories, accomplishments, relationships, disappointments, and personal struggles. A wedding provides a perfect example. Rather than demanding attention, they move through the room introducing themselves to people they've never met. They ask how someone knows the bride and groom, and they ask whether they are family or friends. They ask where they are from or how long, they've known the couple. The conversation revolves around the other person, and the interaction feels pleasant and genuine. The same thing often happens at birthday parties and social gatherings. They move comfortably from group to group, asking questions, learning information, and building connections. They often switch phone numbers because Lord knows they have 1,000+ numbers in their phone. They appear deeply interested in everyone they meet. Most people walk away feeling good about the interaction because they felt heard and appreciated. Many people see this behavior and conclude they are witnessing a genuinely caring and thoughtful person. What often goes unnoticed is that these conversations accomplish more than one thing. While they are learning about other people, they are also establishing themselves. They are creating familiarity. They're creating influence. They're making sure people remember them. They're building connections that may later provide attention, admiration, sympathy, validation, or support. As time passes, their own stories begin appearing. Their own sacrifices begin appearing. Their own struggles begin appearing. Attention slowly begins drifting toward them, without anyone fully noticing the shift. A gathering that was originally about someone else gradually becomes a stage upon which they can present themselves as the most giving, most patient, most understanding, or most long-suffering person in the room. Triangulation, that often becomes one of their most effective tools. They talk down about people behind their backs while appearing friendly to their faces. They criticize one person while speaking to another. They carry information from one relationship into another relationship. One friend hears complaints about another friend. One family member hears criticism about another family member. The people involved often have no idea that similar conversations are taking place elsewhere about them. And it doesn't always have to be about them. Everywhere they go, this is what they do. Conflict begins appearing where no conflict previously existed. Relationships that were functioning normally begin developing tension. Feelings become hurt. Trust begins to erode. Misunderstandings begin multiplying. What makes this especially difficult to recognize is that the narcissistic martyr often presents themselves as the solution rather than the source. They become the comforter, the advisor, the listener, the peacemaker. To outsiders, they appear to be the person trying to bring everyone back together. So how that works is they will cause conflict, maybe hear something from one person, take it to the next, vice versa. And then when there's an argument going on, they come in and they understand both people in two separate conversations. So they're there to save the day. So triangulation means they start the problem and then they come in and clear it up. Many survivors eventually realize that the person creating the confusion is often the same person benefiting from it. Sometimes they don't. When people are upset, they become needed. When people are hurt, they become needed. When people are divided, they become needed. The chaos reinforces their identity as the rescuer, the helper, the wise advisor, or the person holding everything together. Many people are shocked to discover that while the narcissistic martyr is speaking kindly to someone's face, they may be speaking very differently behind that person's back. Conversations often begin with stories about hardship and suffering, disappointment and sacrifice. The discussion gradually shifts toward another person. Complaints appear, criticisms appear, character flaws are discussed, mistakes are highlighted. The listener walks away feeling sympathy for the narcissistic martyr, while developing a less favorable opinion of the person being discussed. One of the defining characteristics of this dynamic often appears when someone finally begins pushing back. Yeah, when that partner, family member, friend starts realizing what's going on, the discussion may begin with gossip, manipulation, lies, disrespect, broken promises, triangulation, or the way someone has been treated. Before long, however, the focus shifts. The conversation moves away from what they did and onto what you did. After all, it's not about them. They don't hold any accountability. Personally, give it right back. The discussion moves away from their behavior and onto your reaction to their behavior. Accountability disappears and blame takes its place. Rather than acknowledging the damage they caused, they begin explaining why they were justified. I do everything for everybody else. This is for me. I'm doing something for me. Well, rather than accepting responsibility, they begin listing your faults. Rather than addressing the issue being discussed, they begin rewriting the story. The criticism they spread becomes your fault. The arguments become your fault. The tension becomes your fault. The distance becomes your fault. The relationship problems, they become your fault. The discussion that began as an attempt to address a problem often ends with them portraying themselves as the injured party and portraying the person confronting them as the source of the problem. And believe you me, they blow up when you call them on something that they do wrong. Many survivors eventually realize that accountability threatens the image the narcissistic martyr has created. Accepting responsibility would require stepping out of the role of victim. Stepping out of the role of victim would mean giving up the sympathy, validation, support, and attention that role provides. For that reason, many survivors discover that no matter what subject is being discussed, the conversation somehow arrives at the same destination. The narcissistic martyr remains the victim and someone else is blamed for what happens. This pattern rarely remains confined to the relationship itself. Friends become audiences. Family members become audiences. Co-workers also become audiences. Anyone willing to listen can become part of the story. Rest assured, they're doing it to them as well. Complaints are repeated, grievances are shared, and stories are told in ways that generate sympathy, support, validation, and, of course, loyalty. The people closest to them often become stepping stones in this process. Their struggles become stories. Their mistakes become stories. Their private moments become stories. Their conflicts become stories. Information that should have remained within the relationship becomes material used to gain support from other people. And believe me, every little gross, disgusting moment in your life is out there on the table. When someone finally begins recognizing the pattern and challenges it, the reaction can be intense. The challenge is viewed as a threat to the image of the narcissistic martyr who has worked so hard to build that reputable persona. The person who remains silent for years suddenly becomes unreasonable. The person asking questions suddenly becomes difficult. The person seeking accountability suddenly becomes the source of the conflict. The narrative changes quickly. Friends hear a new version of events. Family members now also hear it. People who were once told how important and valued someone was may suddenly begin hearing how difficult, unfair, unreasonable, or hurtful that the same person has become. Yes. As time passes, many survivors begin noticing another pattern. The narcissistic martyr's attention often shifts when they are no longer receiving enough admiration, validation, sympathy, attention, or control from the relationship, or they get bored. The person who once seemed fascinated by every detail of your life may become distant. The person who once wanted to spend every moment with you, well, they may appear, and out of nowhere, suddenly appear focused elsewhere. New friendships become important. New social circles become important. Oh, yeah. New activities become important, if you get where I'm going with that. New relationships become important. Many survivors describe feeling as though they were slowly pushed aside while someone else was being pulled closer. And they also will go back to prior relationships and draw them in as well. In some cases, the narcissistic martyr begins forming new emotional or romantic relationships before the existing relationship was truly ended. The survivor is often left feeling blindsided because the same person who once claimed devotion and loyalty has quietly begun investing their time and energy and attention somewhere else. And they often will go and let them know that they are the most important one in their lives. You know I love you more. And they degrade the other person. And they do that with every person. Believe me, it even comes back to their partner. Yeah. They even tell their own partner that they're the most important person. What makes this especially painful is that accountability frequently remains absent. The betrayal is minimized, the behavior is justified, the focus shifts toward, well, what was supposedly missing. What the survivor allegedly failed to provide, or why the narcissistic martyr believes they are entitled to make the choices they made. Once again, the conversation circles back to the familiar narrative in which they are the victim and someone else is responsible. Accolades, accolades. What makes the pattern even more confusing is that the narcissistic martyr often refuses to let go completely. They move into new relationships while continuing to hold on to old ones. They may claim they are finished. They may claim they have moved on, or claim they want nothing more to do with the relationship. At the same time, they continue keeping a connection alive. They reach out periodically. They gather information through mutual friends and family, and they maintain contact when it benefits them because they do not want to lose access completely. And in a relationship, again, treat you like crap and then they come back with a smile. Many survivors eventually realize that the narcissistic martyr does not always want to choose between relationships. They often want access to all of them. Former partners remain available. New partners remain available. Friends remain available, and anyone providing attention, validation, admiration, sympathy, or emotional support remains valuable. The result is that people often begin feeling less like loved ones and more like possessions that are kept available until needed. After all, they collect phone numbers and friends like most people collect fine china. The moment the narcissistic martyr senses that they may lose access completely, the behavior often changes again. The same person who seemed distant suddenly becomes attentive, affectionate, and understanding and kind all over again. Yes, the same person who appeared emotionally invested elsewhere suddenly appears emotionally invested in the relationship again. The moment the narcissistic martyr senses that they may lose access completely, that behavior does change. Many survivors describe feeling as though they are seeing the person they first met. Hope returns, doubts begin fading, and future starts looking different all over again. Over time, however, many survivors realize they are not witnessing change. They are witnessing another turn of the same cycle. For many people, it feels less like a relationship and more like being reeled back in, like you're a fish, and after finally breaking free. The kindness, they may feel different in the moment, but the pattern remains exactly the same, and most of all for them, it is a huge game for the narcissist, and they feed on keeping your emotions in turmoil. Thanks for listening.